I'm Chad Izell, and this is Three Chords and the Truth, a podcast that explores the connection between God and good music.
He's a guy that is just sick of being manipulated for other people's gain. You know, he's just tired of feeling like I'm a puppet and people are constantly pulling my strings because of what they want. And I think his attitude towards, like the music industry and kind of his philosophy of I'm going to make these records. And then when I'm done, I'm done. I'm out. You're not going to get me a farewell tour or comeback tour, all that, because that's not what I want to do. And I think, when I listen to his stuff, he's constantly fighting against whether it's, quote, the man, corporations, the government, other people, just individuals. I just hear a guy that's like, I just want something real. And so much of the world I operate in seems phony and manipulative for selfish reasons. And I'm just not going to, I'd rather be alone than play that game. I really debated doing the song Make Art Not Friends, because I think it really, really comes through in that one. He's like, I think I'd rather just stay home and make art, not friends.
Yeah,
because
that seems,
it's genuine, and this isn't genuine.
You think that's why he resonates with people, though? I mean, I think we all have kind of that detector, and it's like we recognize that there's a lot of fake stuff in the world. I mean, when you go out, when you go to Walmart or when you go to church, I mean, you can kind of tell that, we're all just kind of looking happy, shiny happy people or something like that. Isn't that a song somewhere?
Yep.
But I think what drew me to Sturgill was you start hearing his music, and number one, I liked it. Just the sound. It's at least that early stuff. I really liked the sound. But then you start listening to the words and you think, and reading his interviews, I think was kind of eye-opening to me. You just kind of get the idea that this guy's, man, he is not going to bow down to anybody. He's going to do it his way. He's going to make the music he wants to make. It's very authentic. I think that resonates with people. I think there are probably bigger lessons outside of just music that just resonates with people throughout all of life, right?
Yeah. Well, I don't. Several years ago, I know I did that marriage retreat thing, and one of the lessons I did, and I think it was pretty popular with the audience. I did a lesson called "Instagram's Not Real," and it was about how much of our lives are fake just for approval or attention. And people I knew personally, you look at their Instagram and it's, they got the dream life. They're like, local celebrities amongst their church or their friends or people that just barely know them, and they're like, oh, it's just beautiful. And I'm doing the marriage counseling for these people, and I know they're miserable. Their lives are horrible. Their marriages are horrible. They're coming apart at the seams. But you look at their Instagram, and I made the point. Look, we're all guilty of that. We're all guilty of that. I said, if you're using Instagram, nobody takes, nobody just snaps a picture and posts it. They stage it first. They use different filters and things like that. I said, you want to make sure you get get the palm tree in the background, or make sure you get the Ferris wheel. You're cultivating this image. So we all know it, and we all participate in it, but we all hate it simultaneously.
Yeah.
And so when somebody comes along like him and just is like, you're either going to love me or hate me, but it's going to be for me being me.
Yeah.
If you hate me, fine, but this is who I am. And if you love me, great. You're going to love who I really am, and not this carefully crafted and cultivated product by some music industry, conglomerate or something like that. Yeah. And I think that's what resonates with us.
It's funny you brought up the Instagram thing. Alicia, we have chickens. We have a few chickens at home, hens, eggs, all that stuff. Got a rooster we'd love to get rid of. But she was on Instagram today, and I walked by the kitchen table, and she was just kind of scrolling for a second. And she said, look at this chicken coop. Somebody on Instagram had this, chickens are pretty nasty animals. Like they're it takes a lot to make them respectable. But this chicken coop had like wallpaper and had paintings and mirrors inside the chicken coop, and it was all clean. And she's like, our chicken coop, it's not that clean. It doesn't look like that. That's Instagram, right? That's social media. I think you talked about how it's all dressed up, it's staged, it's curated, it's
and the reason is
and if we
because of
start
exactly what
comparing,
she did. It made
yeah,
her stop and look at it.
yeah,
That's the
and you don't
goal.
get any of that with Sturgill Simpson. He don't care, and I love
Yeah.
that. That's one of the big things I think that draws me to him.
Dude, you go
And
through
I
his
think
catalog, the diversity in that catalog. I mean, his Sound and Fury album
yes,
and his bluegrass album.
mm-hmm.
It's just insane. Fuzz
Yeah,
rock and bluegrass, same guy. And if you listen to the lyrics, same message.
yeah.
It's that he's one of the few people that I hear and I go, okay, when somebody talks about an artist, they're talking about this, somebody like this is what they're talking about.
Yeah.
This is art to and I get it. And I think that's always been attractive to people.
And it's
Always.
not just music. I mean, I think there are really good implications for Christianity, for faith. I mean, that runs the whole gamut, I think, of like stop pretending and stop acting like everything's good when it's not. Be real. And I think that draws us into closer relationships with other people. If we keep pretending, then we just really short circuit that whole process. And there's no way to develop deep relationships because everything's built on a lie and you have to keep up the lie. And so you really prevent yourself from forming the kind of relationships that benefit us in life. I mean, what a blessing it is to have a small group of friends that know who you are and respect it and accept you with all your stupid flaws and everything.
Let me tell you a story about our own life. This is kind of how the lesson, like how I learned the lesson. Of course, my background, how I grew up and where I grew up, all that stuff. So when we went through a lot of stuff we went through with our family, I don't recommend this. I don't. In hindsight, it was a bad decision. Um, Nadia Bowles-Weber has this quote where she says, "Preach from your scars, not your wounds." Because when you preach from your wounds, you just bleed all over the audience. Well, I preach from my wounds, but I didn't know I was in so much pain. I didn't know. I didn't know any. I didn't know what else to do, and so I talked very, very openly about things in our life and things we were going through, things from my own past. I've said things in front of 5,000 people that my own family didn't even know, and I don't. I don't recommend that at
I
all.
don't recommend that.
No, that was a horrible, horrible decision. But I'll say this: it resonated with people. I'm not going to say never or anything like that. I'm just talking about my own personal experience. A lot of those people had never heard a preacher be so honest before an audience. I grew up in a time when, when I was a little kid, Tom Holland he was like the patron saint of, Middle Tennessee. And um, his first place he ever preached was in Minor Hill, which is in this county. His first real big work was at my home church. My grandmother and my dad and my uncle, they all became members of that church because of him. Like he knew that my grandmother was a Christian but wasn't going to church anywhere, and so he went and visited them and told them to get the kids in Sunday school. So he walks on water in these parts, And I can remember sitting in the pew as a kid, and even when I came back to my faith, like when I was in my early 20s, and just looking at him, and the thought that I had in my mind was like, man, if I could ever be like him, and I didn't mean like preaching, I meant my faith. I looked at him, I was like, this guy's got it all together.
Yeah.
And for me, Christianity was very muddy and bloody and just sticky and just a mess. And he had it all together, it looked like. Of course, then I became a preacher and I realized that's all a joke. People, you can't judge somebody just, 30 minutes in a pulpit.
Hey, don't blow my cover, please.
But that's what I thought. Okay. And, I never heard people talk about real problems that they had. So, and I think a lot of people it's the same thing as Instagram. I'm not saying preachers are being fake. I'm not implying that at all. But I think it's the same concept that people see you on Sunday morning at your absolute best. You know, you're dressed nice, you look nice, everything's nice. But I talked about this stuff that was ugly and real. Our marriage troubles, my son, just the whole shebang. And the first time I really did this was, and I didn't plan it. The sermon that I wrote to deliver that night was not the sermon I delivered. I was sitting on the front pew at Forest Park Church Christ in Valdosta, Georgia. They have this thing called Yes Weekend, and it's like a big youth. It's not like nearly the size of CYC, but I mean it's a big youth thing down in South Georgia. And I was speaking that night, and I don't know, I just had this something gnawing at me. I don't even remember I think the topic they gave me was the scars of depression. All right. Well, I told some things from my childhood. Well, not my childhood, my teen years, that I'd never told anybody. But something just was, I felt like there was some stuff I needed to say. And I mean, we literally had like 200 responses that night. And everybody was saying the same thing. The people were talking about pornography addictions, drug addictions, being sexually abused, suicide attempts, cutting, just all sorts of stuff. And I attribute it to the fact that they just weren't accustomed. Whether we want to or not, we venerate preachers. I mean, authority figures, I know things are changing in our culture, but historically, to be a preacher was automatically an authority figure, and you're respected in any room you go in. You get special parking at the hospital, you get special privileges at the hospital. I've been many times I've been let in when family wouldn't be let in. So there's this respect. And so when I told things that were happening in my life and had happened in him, it was like it made people feel like maybe I'm not as screwed up as I think I am. Because here's Brother Brandon, and we think he's good. We think he's got it together. We think he's, like I thought about Tom Holland, and I think it made people feel not so alone. That like, and then when all these people start coming forward, you start realizing, and I mean, we're talking about like 12-year-olds to 80-year-olds. So it's not just, I mean, and people were saying their parents were struggling with this, their grandparents, and it just was it was this incredibly cathartic moment for me personally of not feeling alone. And I think it resonated with other people because it was real. That's what I think. I think the people reacted the reason they did because they felt like this is the most real thing I've ever touched in church. Nobody's pretending. We're saying things that are ugly and scary, but they're true.
Yeah.
All right. So that was the good. Here's the bad. And I'm going to confess on myself. I'm ashamed of this, but it's the truth and it's a sin I had to acknowledge. Two things happened after that. One, other people at other events wanted me to come and do that. And I'm not saying that the motives are impure or anything like that, but I think it resonated again, the realism. All right. And so I did. But two things happened. One is very quickly I became the trauma speaker, talk about all this ugly stuff. So I started getting a lot of those invitations to do that stuff. And number two, and this part I'm really ashamed of, is I realized, hey, this works.
What do you mean works?
Audiences respond to it.
Uh-huh.
And then ego got involved. And when it began, it was pure and honest, coming out of a heart that was in tremendous pain. And it was a therapy for me of sorts. I basically was doing my prayer healing with God in front of an audience. And again, I don't recommend it. I don't think it's a good thing, but it's what happened. It was pure. It was very pure. It got to a point though where it was less pure.
Hmm. And why?
Um,
Why was that? Yeah.
well, because I think it's the same thing that happened with, like, Sturgill Simpson's music. Okay, if something resonates, you learn I can do this, and the audience does that, and you become a puppet master. You become doing the thing that you're actually despising and trying to fight against, which is honesty and realism. Well, you may be telling the truth, but you're not doing it from a pure place.
Hmm.
You're doing it from a place of manipulation for, not literally. I mean, not, but you do it for applause. You do it for, you know, praise, response, invitations. Um,
Well,
and
nobody like you've preached, I've preached. Nobody wants to preach like put a lot into a lesson. Nobody wants to
yeah,
preach a lesson and walk down and nobody say good sermon.
right. And that's what I'm saying.
You
It's a,
said one time, this is a long time ago, and you may not even remember saying it, but you said something like nobody gets into preaching because they don't want people to look at them. And
that's true.
I've always remembered that. And
But
there's some ego. Like if you're
well,
not careful, if you're halfway decent, if you're not careful, I think it can be a dangerous to your ego. Yeah.
that's it. Absolutely. I mean, all you got to do is look to the Gospels. The apostles did it.
Yeah.
They're bucking for position. Let me be on your right hand, on your left. Who's your favorite? Who's the inner circle? It's human nature because we respond to things that make us feel good, that reinforce, like positive reinforcement, like a connection with somebody, like not only did people in the audience feel like, hey, you mean a preacher has these same problems that I have? I also felt like there's a lot of other people who are sympathetic, and who are feeling. But the last time I ever did it, um, like, I don't, this is going to sound dumb maybe. I intentionally wanted to quote unquote sabotage my own career for my own um, integrity, I guess you'd say, my own faith. And I had another speaking engagement, and I literally, as soon as it was done, as soon as I got done speaking, I felt disgusting because I knew I had prostituted my own pain. And I've never felt more humiliated. Just, I felt awful. I didn't, and I just say, because I knew what I was doing. I knew somewhere he had crossed over from this place of purity and genuineness to becoming a tool. And like I said, that's the best way to feel. I felt like I was prostituting my own pain, and it felt disgusting.
Yeah.
And I swore I would never do it again. And I don't think I have. Well, let me say this. I'm not saying I've never spoken about things that were painful, but I pulled away from that, and I turned down a bunch of different opportunities to come speak at things. This is like, no, this is, I've told our story. I've told it too much. I'm not telling it anymore. It's our story. Um, and so now when I do tell any of that stuff, it is very different because I don't ever want to go there anymore. I mean, I did. It's one of the, as silly as it sounds, it's one of the lowest moments of my life because I felt that I betrayed everything that was important to me, you know.
Was there a
Um,
time at which you could have continued to do that and not felt like you were betraying what was important to you? But surely you had to have some kind of you gained some knowledge at some point along the way that changed the way you thought about that ego. I mean, when was that? What made you change that thinking is what I'm trying to get at.
Things got so bad in our family that I just I broke. I mean, just the lowest, most pain. The pain is just so overwhelming. I couldn't even process it anymore. You know how you've heard and seen where people get hurt so bad, like they literally pass out.
Mhm.
Like it's like a defense mechanism of your body. It's
Yeah.
like you just, for your own protection, it shuts you down. That kind of happened to me in a spiritual, emotional, psychological way. Now, the beauty is that was also the catalyst for my resurrection. It's like you have to die first. And Richard Rohr's got that great quote where he says, "Holiness rarely feels like holiness; it just feels like you're dying."
Yeah.
And I can relate to that
Yeah.
because um, it it killed away a lot of stuff. And when you have someone that you love so much, and you don't know if they're going to live or die, you don't know if they are alive or dead. There's a lot of stuff you just stop caring about.
Yeah.
Yeah, they doesn't matter
Yeah.
anymore. You just don't care. And one of the first things to go is ego. I mean,
Hmm.
and to quote Sturgill, I woke up today and decided to kill my ego. It didn't do
Yeah.
me any good anyway.
Yeah.
And there's truth in that. There's a lot of truth in that. I came across that, I think, when I was reading a Thich Nhat Hanh book called "Living Buddha, Living Christ," and it's about a lot of the parallels in Buddhism and Christianity. And one of the things is about the death of ego, and that I'm sure wise people could tell you what good ego is. I'm sure there is some value to it, but I think there's a lot more bad to it than good, at least in my experience, my own personal life. And a lot of, I'm not going to say my ego's dead, because I think you have to, it's like Freddy from Nightmare on Elm Street. You got to kill it over and over and over. It just won't stay dead.
Yeah.
Um, but I do think about that line from that song a lot. I've got to wake up today and I got to kill my ego, because if I don't, it's going to manipulate me into things that run contrary to my personal values.
Hmm.
And it's so subtle. It can use your personal values, but again, using it for an impure purpose. It's not just doing good, but it's what's your motive behind it? What's your reason? And that's 1 Corinthians 13. You
Yeah.
know, give my body to be burned, speak tongues of men and man, all that stuff. But the motivation is messed up. It's not driven from a place of love. Um, so that that's what happened to me, and that's what was the catalyst for. I've got to radically rethink my whole life, everything, because the things that got me to this point, there was a time when I thought they saved me. And then lo and behold, if the enemy's not so crafty that he can actually take the means of your salvation and turn them in such a way that they become the means of your destruction.
Yeah.
And that's what
I
was
mean,
happening
and
with
you're
me.
using, I think I hear you using salvation as a healing, right?
Right.
Of
Yeah, absolutely.
becoming human, becoming whole.
Right.
But even a good thing can turn into a destructive thing if it becomes the ultimate thing. That's idolatry,
Mm-hmm.
right?
That's it. Absolutely. And say that again, Sturgill, this is where I think, I don't know a lot about the guy personally. I've seen some interviews, I listen to stuff, and I'm sure that I am aggrandizing him in ways that are inaccurate and maybe he wouldn't even agree with or like. All I'm responding to, I'm not really talking about him. I'm talking about the lessons I've learned from his music
Hmm.
and the things that I personally am hearing in these lyrics. And some of it I can attach myself to and go, hey, I think I understand the feeling behind that.
Yeah, right.
And to me, for him, what I hear so much is, if something's good and works, what is instinctive that we want to do? We want to do it again and multiply it. And then
Hmm.
somebody else goes, hey, what did y'all do how'd y'all do that? Because what they're wanting is, they want to do it. They want to come over here and do it over here
Right.
and get the same thing. And then somebody comes along and goes, hey, people probably pay for that. And now they want to sell it. And I imagine if you were in the world, whether you're an actor or you're an artist or a musician or whatever, that is so true, that other people want to own you and use you for their own benefit. Um, we watched some stuff recently. Coincidentally, we watched the movie Elvis, the more recent one. I don't remember the one that Tom Hanks is in. Baz Luhrmann was the director. I don't remember. I think the movie's called Elvis. And then Priscilla, which is based on Elvis and Me, and it's kind of her side of the story.
Okay.
And they're very, very different stories. I think they're both true, because perspective changes how people see the
Matters.
same thing.
Yeah.
Um, but there's a lot of things that Elvis did that I believe are indefensible. So don't take anything I'm about to say as a defense or excuse of it, because some of it's just vile. That being said, I don't think anybody in his position has a chance. To me, the worst thing you could do to me would give me what he had. I don't think a human being is capable of being healthy like that.
Why not? There may be some Elvis fans. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, okay. Unlimited adoration.
Why would that be destructive?
Because none of us are as good as people think we are. And I don't know that any of us are as bad as we think we are. And I think you need the yin and the yang. You need the balance. You need, it's not that praise is bad. It's not that criticism is bad. It's too much of either one becomes destructive. And, that's just a principle. I don't think you need to be a philosopher. I don't think you need to have religion. I don't think you need any of that to understand. Excess is usually when we get into problems. About the only thing I can think of that there's no, problem with in excess is, maybe the fruit of the spirit.
Yeah.
Love,
well,
joy.
I mean, he says that. There's no law against this because
there's no law against it. So,
more is
there are
better.
some things, but, in his case, he's got more money than he could ever spend. He's got adoration by everybody in the world. He's got incredible talent, So you put all of these things together in one person. And then what happens? The way he's presented in the movie is, Colonel, whatever the guy's name was, is exploiting him. He's just a product, Elvis became the product. And the product makes a lot of money for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And you have entourages and posses and hangers on, and suddenly nobody ever tells you no. Suddenly nobody ever tells you anything's a bad idea. Look at Elvis in the later years. There was nobody to tell him, dude, you're wearing this weird rhinestone onesie and you're doing karate on stage. But, the celebrity's so big now, nobody cared. And just look at most, celebrities at that status.
Is that kind of what is it, the Emperor's New Clothes kind of thing, right?
Yeah, nobody was willing, the Emperor's naked. Nobody's willing to say it.
Nobody's willing to say it.
Yeah. So, and I see that, celebrity to me it would be a curse, because I've never had celebrity. I've had some people in a church say they like my sermon.
Yeah.
I was in one setting one time. I was a young preacher at this time. I got invited to speak at like our local school board thing. Like and at that time it was the biggest audience I'd ever been in front of. And and listen, I grew up in a big church. My church was like 400 members when I was a kid. And so when I preached there every Sunday, I'm preaching 400 people. All right. But this was the entire school board of education, everybody, janitors to superintendent, everybody in the school system, all in one room. And they asked me to do like the invocation and give a little speech like that. Well, this is the first time I've ever spoken in a non-church setting. All right. So when I got done, they applauded. That's just what they do. When speaker's done, everybody claps.
Yeah.
I was probably like 23 years old. I didn't say anything. I didn't say anything worthwhile at all, but they applauded. I've never been applauded before, in the church.
Felt good, didn't it?
It felt too good.
Yeah.
It felt scary good. And can you imagine being in an arena with 100,000 people? Can you imagine being Taylor Swift and people are watching you watch a ball game?
Mm-hmm.
Can you imagine how you would have to be really careful, really grounded to not just lose your mind in that. Okay, so now how's this apply to Sturgill? I think he understood that. And it's like, look, I didn't get into this to be a superstar. That's not what I got started. Now, if I can make a living playing music, it's better than making a living, working on trains. Right?
Yeah.
But that's not why I'm doing it. I'm not doing it because I want to be a superstar. I'm doing it because I enjoy doing it. I got something I want to say, and so I'm gonna say it. And if I can make a living doing that, that's great. But I think he found out real quick, you are good at it. People will pay for it. And so a lot of other people go, there's a lot of money we can make on this. And there's a scene in that movie with Elvis where, and I don't know if this is true, but I think it's true whether or not it actually happened. I mean, when I say true, it's true to the industry and events like that. You know, you remember Pink Floyd wrote a song called performed a song called "Comfortably Numb," and in the story, the artist can't perform that night. They call in a doctor to basically give him a shot to prop him up and get him out there on stage singing because you know you got to make money, you got to sell those tickets. Well, in this scene in the Elvis movie, he collapses before a show, and they do that. They call the doc. I don't know what he gives him, amphetamines, whatever. And this is a guy that at this stage in his career is obviously not well in any way. But he was such a commodity and so many people benefited from it. They just leached off of it.
Yeah.
And I think Sturgill's music, what you hear him saying in his music is, you ain't doing that to me.
Mm-hmm.
You're not doing that to me. And in my own personal story, the problem is other people don't have to do it to you. You can do it to yourself. You can turn yourself into a commodity if you're good at something or you succeed at something or people show interest in something. If you're not careful and keep your motives pure and your attitude right, something that maybe you love and that at one point was something that made you feel good and was therapeutic to you can become a gilded cage, so to speak. And
Well,
I
that
don't see
becomes
that any celebrity to me is that. That's what celebrity is.
and in the
And
church world that you and I are most familiar with, that becomes the very dark underbelly of the church, right?
mhm.
I mean, that's
That's the thing that people don't talk about, and that's the thing I'd say probably your average church member doesn't understand.
there is, especially you and I, we started preaching in churches when we were relatively young. Um, and at that point, I think you almost have to fit the mold because sometimes you got to put food on the table for the family, right? And so
Right.
you are expected to, uphold certain, expectations of people and whether or not it's beneficial for the church or as a young guy, you just have to go along with it to keep doing what you're doing. And that's the way that you
Right.
provide for your family. And especially if you have dreams or, aspirations of being the big time preacher, that you have to go along with those things so that people will recognize you and well, like you said, want you to come speak. And all it does is inflate egos. I mean,
Mhm.
I think I've seen it enough consistently to say, man, that creates a pretty harmful environment in churches.
It
If a
does.
guy is afraid to say what needs to be said, um, or to preach eh, whatever needs to be preached that's going to promote the changes needed to take place that need to take place. If he's scared to do that, that creates a very dangerous situation in churches, I think.
Well, and I
Um,
don't think it's just here's what I'm saying. It's certainly not just churches. I think maybe people don't realize is it happens in churches too. But we shouldn't be surprised because I think it happens in any institution. Um, I don't have a high view of national politicians. I think probably most of those people, when they started that journey, it was incredibly pure motives. I see problems in my world. I think I've got the ability and knowledge and the work ethic to do something about it, to make things better.
mhm.
And then they get maybe, let's say, especially if they get up to Washington, D.C., and they realize, yeah, that ain't how it works. You come up here with noble intentions and pure motives, and you find out you can do that, and two things are going to happen. Number one, nothing that you ever want to do is ever going to happen because you're not going to get support if you don't play ball, if you don't,
Yeah,
play with the team. And number two, you're not going to be here very long. You're going to be one term. You're
yeah.
going to be here for a term. You're not going to get anything done. Party's not going to back you. You're not going to get the money. You're not going to get support, and you're not going to get reelected. Um, so, what do people do? Well, they think, well, you know, you gotta go along to get along. So I'm going to play the game, not because I want to, but because if I'm not here, I can't do any good. If I am here, maybe I can at least do some good. Then I think you see some of them that over time, it just consumes them and it becomes all about self now. It's just about self-promotion, celebrity, money, power, fame, etc., ego. Um, Now, I'm sure that happens in the military, in corporate America, in school systems. And yeah, I know it happens in churches because I don't think this is something that's unique. I don't think it's showing some flaw that exists in any of these institutions. I think what you're seeing is the flaws that exist in human beings. When you have large collections of human beings in one place, then the potential for that to be amplified just goes up. And we begin to, compromise certain things that used to be important to us in order to do other things that are still important to us.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I don't think any, the music industry, the music industry, you're talking about churches. And I think you find it everywhere.
Anytime there's an institution, there's people involved, and it has a chance to
Right.
go badly.
And see where things are different now, I believe, is because of the incredible availability of information. People in every institution are becoming profoundly aware of this. And what you're seeing is, especially from a younger generation, I would even include my generation in this. I'm Gen X, and we're the middle child of generations right now. But I think there is a loss of trust in all institutions
Why?
because of the corrupt. I think we're more aware of the corruption on a large scale than we ever used to be. You pick any institution and give me 10 minutes on the internet, and I will fill a page with scandals and abuses in that institution. And because used to, we didn't know that.
Yeah.
I mean, used to, like a scandal in an institution was national news because nobody knew about this stuff. Now, it's not that nobody knew, but unless you were an insider, you don't realize the corruption that's going on. Well, that's not true anymore. I mean, it's just all over, everywhere, all the time. And younger generations, especially, have grown up with it that always. So here's the question: why would a 25-year-old trust any institution today? Give me the reason why they would. It's easy to say, well, why would they? No, why would they? Because
Well, I think
education,
if you're asking for an
healthcare,
answer,
religion, military, politics, you name it, they've grown up just seeing nothing but scandals. So what's kind of the conditioning of you can't trust any of this stuff.
don't
And
you think people have to see truth and goodness and beauty in order to develop trust? I mean, it's not, I think gone are the days where people will just blindly accept the message of a person or even an institution. Um, it's so easy to fact check. It's so easy to have access to all the information in the world. But I don't think there's any substitute for truth and goodness and beauty. I mean, those are the things I think that draw people. And after a while of seeing that this really is a good person or this is a good group of people, I think that's the way to get over that, don't you? Maybe you
I
don't. I don't know.
wholeheartedly, no, I
Yeah.
wholeheartedly agree. But here's the thing: used to, all you saw was the beauty, and you had to work to see the ugly.
Yeah.
That's where an investigative journalist
Huh.
came into play, and they spent 18 months on this, story, and they finally are able to put it in print.
And now
Well,
we're
now I
immediately
think
skeptical.
it's literally the opposite.
Yeah.
You have to go looking for the good stuff. It's out there. It's out there. But you have to work for it now. And the bad, you got ready access to it constantly. And
Yeah.
I don't know what to do about that. I don't know how to fix it except just on an individual level of
I hear people talk about, my experiences in Christianity. So I hear people talk about we need a platform. We need to, speak to the masses. Oh, okay. I get it. I mean, who wouldn't want to do that? I don't think there's a substitute for individual people doing the good thing, doing the right thing,
mhm.
doing the
I
thing
agree.
that is and in my reading, that's pretty much following the way of Jesus. I mean, I look at him and I think if I did stuff like he did it, if I talked like he talked, if I treated people like he treated them, the world would be a much better place. My little world would be a
Mhm.
much better place. And if you got a group of people doing that, that's church. That's what.
Exactly. Well, see that what I was talking about earlier, that you hit right on the core of it. Of we need a platform. That goes back to what I was talking about my own experiences before. Okay, we want to amplify this, and I understand where that comes from. All right, but I don't think you can. I don't think you can manufacture that stuff. Because if you do, then that's exactly what it is. It's manufactured. It's
Yeah.
not. It's not organic. You made it. All
Right.
right. And if you made it, then all of your biases and all of your everything, all your negative stuff is going to be in it too. That's why I was using that language earlier about when I first did that, it came from a pure place. Later, it wasn't as pure. All right. But you take like, you want to amplify a message, stuff like that. I can't say this because I don't know. I'm not a historian who studied it. This is just one man's opinion. I don't think Martin Luther King Jr. wanted to be a civil rights icon. I think he just saw some stuff and he couldn't keep his mouth shut anymore and he had to talk about it. I think it happened that he became the mouthpiece for the civil rights movement, right? The face of it. And of course, that has its side effects too, because he's a human, he's flawed, and if there's anything, the industry, quote unquote, loves, it's to build people up and tear them down. So I don't think you can, I think when you manufacture things, I think you're destined for failure in that.
Mm-hmm.
Because at some point, like I said, people realize the Instagram's not real thing. They realize this is cultivated. This was, you know, and now there's AI doing research on everything I ever touch on my phone, how long I look at a spot on my phone, and then they are cultivating and doing all the turns of the dials to get me to do what they want to do. Now, since we've spent like an hour talking, maybe we should talk about the song that we came here, to talk about.
Well,
because that's
here's what I
exactly
usually
what I
do.
think this song's about, man. This is what I
My
think this
thought
song's about.
was I'm gonna let Brandon talk for a few minutes. Then I'll kind of introduce him because you don't live where I live, and I really like I'm committed to not looking at who listens to this because number one, I don't want to get discouraged if nobody is. And I don't
Right.
want to get too inflated if a lot of people are. So
Hey, you're doing exactly what we're talking about. It's just fun for
I
you. You want to
I'm
have these
trying not to look at
conversations.
any of that stuff. I assume most of the people who listen to this live somewhere around me and they don't know who you are. And I was going to let you talk for a minute and then talk about who you are. And so probably right now people are saying this guy either is a genius or is
A
an idiot.
madman. He's
And
a madman. Who is this guy? What is he ranting about? What is he even talking about?
so
Yeah.
like you're this you're like this weird juxtaposition of you got this country accent, and hillbilly kind of accent, but all the wisdom that comes out. They're like, so who in the world is Brandon Britton? That's what I want to know.
Who is
I
Brandon
know I've
Britton?
known you for a long
Yeah.
time. I've known you as preacher most of the time, but I've really gotten to know
Right.
you over the last year or something like that too, maybe. But you've got a really unique story of coming from kind of the seat of Christianity in Middle Tennessee, and then you've preached at some pretty influential places, I think, and you've gotten out of that kind of lifestyle at this point. And you and I've connected in different ways, but for some reason you picked this song, and when I was thinking about this, and the song we hadn't even talked about it yet is "Call to Arms."
Yeah.
My guess is that there was a time in your life where you would have hated this song. Am I right about that?
Absolutely. Yeah. Man, dude, I would have railed. I would have probably preached a sermon against this.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, absolutely. So, but okay, this song to start with. I'd never heard of Sturgill Simpson until this is the song that introduced me to him.
Yeah.
And it just happened because I caught him on Saturday Night Live one night, and he was performing on Saturday Night Live. And the first thing that got my attention is, I love New Orleans, everything about it. He's got a brass band. You got a brass band with rock and roll. I mean, immediately you got my attention. Okay. So, but what happened in watching this performance is, um, it made me stop and pay attention. I've had a few moments in my life where, like, musically, like you have that moment where you like stop and go, what is that? You know? The first time it happened, I was like 16 years old, 15 years old. Nirvana Smells Like Teen Spirit, because it's the hair metal
Yeah.
80s band, all that. And then, I'm at a get together with some friends and this comes on to him. I'm like, what is that? It just stopped you in your tracks. That's how I was with this. I was like, who is this guy? What is this?
What was it that
And
stopped you? I mean, the
well, it was the
brass or
sound. It was the sound initially. Yeah,
okay.
the brass. I was like, oh, okay, got my attention. But then what kept my attention after that was the intensity of the performance, um, amplified by the fact that like what he's talking about, the lyrics and the bravado. Um, I was like, dude, to perform a song like this, most time you go on Saturday Night Live for a musician, that's a big opportunity to get exposed to a really diverse, big audience. Career wise, they can really help you out. This guy is not doing his career any favors with the stuff he's saying and talking about, um, because he was saying things that would turn away a lot of people in this song, the lyrics. But his intensity is what got me. I mean, this guy looked like when he was performing it, and you can Google it on YouTube and watch this performance. He looks mad. I mean, this guy's ticked off. He's got a snarl on his face. And then I'm listening to what he's saying, and I feel like, this is a guy who's, just feels like he's screaming into the void. Only on this occasion, it's not the void; it's national television.
Yeah.
On a very popular, show that's been around for 50 years or whatever. So that kind of, I was like, who? After that, I'm like, who is this dude? Because I was impressed with the bravado for him to get on national television and say this in a venue that normally would be, you want to do something that's going to be catchy and people are going to
Yeah.
like and agree with. You're going to gain new fans. And I felt like probably in that scenario, he may have even lost some fans. Like, yeah, I'm not down with this. So that got my attention. That was different. That was different.
A lot of Sturgill songs, there's a meaning, and he is pretty clear that he does not want to tell you what the meaning is behind a lot of these songs that he writes. And so it's fun to sit around. And from the outset, I've always kind of said, in doing this project, I have no clue where it goes, but I've always said, I am not telling anybody that this is what Sturgill Simpson thought as he wrote this line. I am saying this is a theme I'm picking up on here, and although he may not acknowledge it or may not think this is, the answer to the question that he's posing, I do think that Jesus is the answer to a lot of the questions that he poses. And so I'm trying to get inside the mind of the writer and trying to get inside of what the thought process was to try to figure out what the meaning behind the songs are. You don't have to think really hard to figure out the meaning behind this song. It seems to be intentionally, it's intentionally clear. There's no missing the point, and it's even offensive. And so,
absolutely,
I think well, I was going to say to begin this discussion, but here we are, not at the beginning. I think I'd like to know why this song. Like this is on his album that is written to his newborn, I think, or he wrote this song or wrote this album around the time of the birth of his child. And so it's almost like the whole album is meant to be listened to in progression and to tell a story and to just give life wisdom to his child. And there's this song at the end that is angry and offensive, intentionally so. Why this one?
For me, or
for you? Yeah.
For me. He said some things in this song that I think a lot of us deep down we feel, but it's not acceptable to say in polite company. So, this is one of those songs you listen to by yourself, but you don't play it for your friends kind of thing, unless your friends are like down with you, because otherwise, they might be like, dude, what? For me, he touched on some things that I think there's. All right, so I think I mentioned this to you before. To me, this is his most prophetic song.
Mm-hmm.
And when I'm using the word prophetic, I'm using it in what I understand to be the strictest use of the word prophetic.
And what is that?
Well, there's this quote I've got written down, Christopher Benek. don't even know who that guy is, but I heard this quote and I was like, yeah, there you go. He said, being prophetic is not about looking into a crystal ball and predicting the future. Being prophetic is about observing trends and connecting the dots of how they will impact the future. Um, and so this song, I think, does that. And you know, the language that he employs in this song and the message, it will offend people, and I think that's the point. It's intentionally inflammatory and offensive, but it's like a vocal slap across your face. It's like to get it's like wake up, snap out of it. Um, and so that's why I say I think it's his most prophetic song. And I think that, the prophets, like in scripture, what they always did is they held up a mirror to their generation to show them what they saw, to show them what was real and true,
Mm-hmm.
that people generally don't want to look at. It's making you look at something that you don't want to see. Um, so for me, that's not pleasant. But I know I've got enough sense. I'm almost 50 years old. I got enough sense to know I need that. I need prophetic words in my life. I need the thing that shakes me out of my stupor or distraction or whatever it might be, and shows me truth. Because sometimes truth in myself is ugly, but I need to see it.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, my goal is I want to be. I don't like this term but I just don't. Forgive me for lack of a time. I'm not going to belabor the point, but I want to be the best I can be. I want to be a good person. I want to be a true person. I want to be, what from my perspective, God created me to be as a human being. Now, I know I'll never ascertain that in its perfection, but I want to spend the rest of my life moving towards it.
Sure.
And so every now and then I need slapped across the face to wake up and shown the truth and go, hey, this is the truth. And you need to deal with it. You need to face this. So I think that resonated with me in this song, because I think that's exactly what he's doing to us culturally as Americans in the 21st century. I think that's what he's trying to do.
Well,
Um,
and so this is one of those it's one of those anti-war songs, right? I mean, that's hard to miss that.
I would issue a caution. I don't know that it's anti-war.
Okay.
Um, just generically speaking, I think he's coming from a place, and he served. If I understand, he served in the military,
He did.
so he can speak to this in a way that I couldn't. He can speak to it as an insider. I don't know if this is true. I've read some stuff that suggests that Jesus may have actually been a Pharisee himself, and that's why he spoke so harshly to them, because he was one of them. He could speak in a way that an outsider couldn't. And two things: one, that's powerful, but two, that also really makes people mad, because
Do you
they
notice
can't
that?
they can't hide from you. You know where they hide their secrets, and
Yeah.
their tips and tricks to dodge uncomfortable things, so you can
Yeah.
evade their defenses and hit them where it hurts.
Do you notice that when you think about church? I mean, this is what basically your career has been in church work, right? Ministry.
Hmm.
Do you notice that you kind of do the same thing? And I think I notice I do the same thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm a product of my own environment,
Yeah.
so it's my native habitat, and I know all the code words, and I know the subtext, and I know the pretext, and I know what's being said without anything being said. Just it's assumed. I know all that because everybody has their own environment, and so yeah, it makes it easy to push the buttons if
Yeah,
that's what
and
you want
really,
to do.
I know the need for a prophet because there have been a lot of times that you've been that guy for me. I don't know that you know that or not, but comments that you make or what I hear you say, it's not like you've never done it like against me, I don't think, or anything like that. But
Hmm.
some of the things you say, it's like I recognize this. I've always kind of known those things to be the case. I didn't have the language to put it into
Yeah,
words, and you've helped me a lot of times, um, even though we can't talk about it. you've helped me. You've helped me have language to put into words what I see, and it's just so clear once you see it, and then it's those things you can't unsee anymore.
yeah, and
Once
and
you
we all
learn,
have those people. I've got a list as long as my arm of people that do that with me. And here's the funny thing: I didn't intend to do that with you. They didn't intend to do it with me. They're just trying to be real and honest, I think. And when that happens, I think that resonates, especially in a world of illusion and fakeness and manufactured things. I think those things really they speak to us in a way that arouses things in us that maybe we don't even know are there. Um, and the prophets, their whole thing was, the prophets were all about, smashing golden calves. That's what they were
Mm.
doing,
Yeah.
and in a metaphorical sense, and sometimes literal sense.
Yeah.
But they touched on the idols of the people in their day, and people don't like that when you touch their sacred things. Um, Now, people tend to forget, and I would say this is a disclaimer for this song. This may be in the song you want your kid to hear. There's some rough language in this song, but people tend to forget that the prophets in Scripture, uh, they employed some intentionally offensive language too,
Sure.
things you wouldn't necessarily want to say in mixed company. Isaiah's, that our righteousness is filthy rags, and I'll let people Google, and find out what the original meaning is there of that. Ezekiel's comparing idolatry to uh, horse
Yeah.
private areas. I'll just leave it at that. You can Google this and find out. My point is, they said some stuff that we would, you know, I use this word with caution, but a lot of audiences would say that's vulgar. Well, yeah, it was. It's supposed to be so that you'll sit up. Have you ever heard the old joke? The old preacher joke or story. I don't know, but the preacher gets in the pulpit and says, most of the world is going to hell, and nobody here gives a damn about it. And there's a gasp, and he goes, and the reason that's true is because you're more offended by the fact that the preacher said damn than he said that half the world is going to hell. Okay. So sometimes you have to do what shakes people to get them to hear or to see. And a lot of the prophets in the Old Testament were theater prophets. They demonstrated
Yeah.
things in their actions which were meant to be crazy. People are like, what is this dude doing? What's this guy's a nut. But
Isaiah
it's
walks
meant
around
to
naked for
get you.
3 years,
Yeah,
and
it's the whole point's like, look, you're not paying attention.
yeah.
I got your attention at least. So this song, I think he's doing that. He's from the military. And listen, here's the reality. One of the sacred cows for America is the military. You're not really allowed to speak critically about it, or your allegiance is questioned, your gratitude is questioned, your patriotism is questioned. Um, so it's a sacred cow. You want to know if something's a sacred cow? Criticize it and see if people come at you. And then you'll know that's a sacred cow. All right. So it's probably not a great idea for me to do that stuff. Having come from that world, I think gives it more of a punch coming from him, because he's
Yeah.
saying, I'm speaking from experience. I'm speaking from somebody who put his butt on the line. I'm speaking from somebody who signed up and went and served. And I'm going to tell you, here's some stuff I saw, and I got a problem with it. And if you saw it, I think you'd have a problem with it too. But you're not paying attention. So I'm going to say it in such a way that you're going to hear it. And a lot of people are going to hate me for it. But some people are going to go, what's this guy talking about?
Yeah.
And so just like, again, talking about the prophets, prophets were not popular in their day. We revere them. And Jesus talked about Matthew 23, he's talking with, the Pharisees. He's like, yeah,
Yeah.
you build all these shrines of the prophets and you talk about how wonderful they are. But if you were alive back then, you'd have done what your great great granddaddy did. And you'd have killed him because you wouldn't have liked what he heard. And I know that because I'm doing it now and you're going to kill me.
Yeah. I
So
mean,
that's what
the
I mean when I
prophets.
say prophetic. What I mean by it's prophetic. He's shining a light on ugly truths that we'd rather not look at, and
You
it's going to
said
create a very visceral reaction.
you said being prophetic is this is part of that quote. Being prophetic is about observing trends and connecting the dots on how they will impact the future. I know you're not a fortune teller, you don't have a crystal
Right.
ball. What trends do you think are most dangerous right now?
Most dangerous trends right now. Um, personally.
And what do you see when you look down the line? What makes it dangerous?
The conflation of Christianity and nationalism, the blending of those two things. Blaise Pascal had this quote that men never do evil more. I'm going to get the quote right. Forgive me.
With the authority of something.
More, it's basically more joyously or enthusiastically than when they do it from religious conviction.
Yeah.
And his whole point is, when a person believes he's doing the will of God by, nuking his neighbor, buddy, you're not going to stop him because he's killing, because God wants me to kill these people, And here's the danger of that. Everybody around the world throughout history has always thought their God wanted them to kill the other people.
I mean,
There's nothing.
Crusades, Inquisition. There's a lot of.
Whether you're talking about Muslim, Christian, you can't really pick. I don't know. I mean, maybe you can find some. I don't really think you can pick a religion that doesn't have an atrocity in their history of ugly, ugly things. And so my point is, there's nothing really novel about that, which should tell us these things maybe not be divine. They may be humans, using God for their own selfish and, vile purposes. So when I see people trying to conflate Christianity with any particular nation, any nation, I think history tells us for starters, that's never a good thing. I don't know that there's ever been a situation where that ended well. Man, it started with good intentions. Go back, to Constantine and move your way forward through history. I don't think it's ever ended well. And so I don't think there's any reason why we should think now it's going to end well. Like, oh, we're finally the generation that figured out how to mix these two together. Tony Campolo has this quote where he says that mixing, I think it's mixing religion and politics or nationalism together is kind of like mixing ice cream and manure. Doesn't hurt the manure, but it ruins the ice cream. And in this, in that illustration, it's like, Christianity is the ice cream. Okay. You ruin it when you try to bring in the kingdoms of men and hitch them together as if they're the same thing. So that's the the thing that I guess is the most concerning for me personally, just having grandchildren and looking at the future and the things that I'm concerned about for their lives.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think about, well, you also said something about the prophets would hold up a mirror to show their generations things that they didn't want to look at. And they did a lot of that. And a lot of it really has to do with politics. There were some personal holiness things that the prophets called their attention to, but there was also like the economies of the market, and how people just dealt with one another in business and local courts and international treaties. The prophets covered a lot of these things, but they covered issues that people didn't want to talk about, even with religion. I mean, how many of the prophets said something like, I wish that the doors of the temple were closed so nobody could come in here and offer your offerings and sacrifices, and just shut it down and go home if you're not going to treat others better than that. I mean, that's pretty consistent. Right. I desire mercy and not sacrifice. And that landed them in a lot of hot water simply because they were willing to step up and say what needed to be said. I don't know what that says about their ego. I don't know if we can maybe read into any of that, but that's on my mind because you brought it up earlier. But an ego would prevent somebody probably from saying some of those things, knowing that it's going to land you in a lot of trouble. It's going to decrease your following. It's going to hamper your ability to, or hinder your ability to grow in your whatever chosen field it is. And so a lot of people, I think, back down, whether it's religion, music, business, whatever, back down from doing the right thing because the right thing's oftentimes very difficult, I think.
Yeah, and that's where you see a lot of times people will say something that, again, this is a Saturday Night Live thing. That was something I watched a lot growing up. There was years ago, Sinead O'Connor appeared on there, and she was a pretty big pop star at the time. And at the end of her performance, she tore a picture of the Pope in half, and she was protesting specifically abuses of children in the institutional Roman Catholic Church and the cover-ups that were involved that were not protecting the victims, but protecting the institution, or in some cases, the perpetrators. Well, for all practical purposes, on a mainstream level, it ruined her career. I mean, it ruined her career on a mainstream level. But you know what? 20 years removed, however long that's been, she's been vindicated that she was speaking the truth. She was saying something that at the time, not many other people were willing to say publicly, especially if it was going to cost them. And that's so often what happens is we don't want to pay the price for saying the thing that maybe even everybody's whispering about, but nobody wants to say it out loud. Again, because when you touch a sacred cow, people tend to kill the people who do that. You get struck dead if you touch their God's, special, whatever, that's going to get you killed. And in the case of Sturgill with this song, he's coming from a world, and he says some things, that are very provocative, inflammatory. He says the line that they send their sons and daughters to die for some oil to control the heroin. Mm-hmm. That's a pretty serious statement to imply that those who are in control of the U.S. military are sacrificing their sons and daughters, the soldiers who enlist and who want to serve and protect and all that they're sacrificing their lives for the sake of oil and controlling drugs so that they can control leaders and countries and fund things and stuff like that. Well, here's the reality. We know that that's true now in some cases. I mean, you don't have to dig very deep to find out, the Iran-Contra stuff, what was going on in the CIA. I mean, there's been major movies. Nobody really doubts anymore that the CIA was involved in drug smuggling, So and again, this is where the information being always available. It's like, hey, this is not like something that only insiders know, very few. This stuff's out there now. It's not conspiracy theory. It's known, researched, documented historical fact. So now imagine you're somebody who has served in the military. You're a Sturgill Simpson, and you go and you sign up and you get shipped off somewhere. And why did you do that? Because you want to make a difference in the world. You want to make sure your people are safe. You want to do some good. And you get involved in some situations where the people who are sending you don't have the same kind of pure motives that you had. In fact, they may have sinister motives. And you're a pawn in that now, whether willingly or unwillingly, knowing or unknowing. And so he to me, when I hear him singing this song, the thing is, this is not an anti-military song.
No.
He's defending the people who signed up, who are willing. And, people are willing to sacrifice themselves. In fact, it's an honorable thing. Jesus said there's no greater love than a willingness to die for your friend. So this is a noble thing. But he's saying there's people who are in control, who are taking folks that are willing to sacrifice, and they're sacrificing them. There's a difference there. One thing that I'm willing to sacrifice my life, it's another thing for somebody being willing to sacrifice me. That's a totally different thing. And so that's what I hear in this song, is that he has seen some of this stuff, and he's saying, you know what? You're taking good people who are trying to make a difference in the world and make sure people are safe and free, and you're just sacrificing them for your own nefarious purposes. So to me, I understand why people would get very upset when they hear this, because there's a way you can listen to it where you say, well, he's just anti-military. No, he's not anti-military. And that's how these conversations get shut down, though. That's, again, you touch a sacred cow, people want to stop it quickly. They say, oh, you don't support our troops, or you're un-American, or you're this, or you're that. To me, there is no greater way to support the troops than say, don't get somebody killed for something that is not true and noble. They're already willing to die. What you're doing, if you're sending them into harm's way for something that's not true and noble, is on you, not them. So if you want to really support the troops, so to speak, do what's in their best interest. They're already signing up saying, I'm here. I want to help. I want to do. Send me where you need me. Don't abuse that. Don't treat them like they're just fodder that can be, tossed aside for that. And then when they come back home, treat them like you value. That's one of the things that is such a this crazy, dichotomy that we have. On the one hand, there's this elevation of people who serve in the military, but then when they go and serve their time and they come back, oftentimes broken and damaged and in need of tremendous things, it's like, yeah, we don't have the money for that. We don't have the time for that. We're not going to put the resource in that. Why? Because you're not valuable to us anymore for what we're trying to accomplish. Now you're a burden. Now we've got to spend money on you. Now you're draining from that. And to me, that's what he's speaking against. If you've ever worked, with people in the, dealing with the VA and stuff like that, some of that stuff is shameful that these people are having to deal with. You get somebody goes over and, gets a leg blown off or something. And sadly, some of the biggest help to change that has not come from, those in control of the military, but country music stars, the Wounded Warrior Project, things like that, where they're building houses. We have a friend in Florida that went through some horrific things in one of the wars, and they built him a house, for him and his family, because he's going to live with these ramifications for the rest of his life. But these things weren't being done, by the military, quote unquote. They were being done by citizens who are going, hey, you're not treating our guys and girls right. You're not being worthy of their say. That's what I hear in this song.
So what I hear you saying is this is more not an anti-war, anti-military. It's more anti-selfishness and anti-greed when it comes to the powers that be, something like that.
Right. The people who have the ability to make things different, to change things, to not send people into harm's way for something that is not noble. And again, our country is founded on certain principles. We ought to live up to those. If we want to say that America is the greatest country and all this, we can't just put that on a piece of paper. We have to be that. Now, in the religious world, we call that practicing what you preach. Okay. Don't just put on the nice clothes, go to church on Sunday, and we've got some platitudes that we repeat to each other. No, you got to go out on Monday and be that person. That, you talk about loving your neighbor and doing good to them that hate you and being sacrificial and servant and all that and forgiving. You got to be that. It's not just a scripture to put like on your pillow. And I think that's what he's speaking to is these things are true and noble and good. But there are people in positions of power that dictate these things who are not adhering to these things anymore. And he's saying, I'm sick of it.
I think the most interesting part of the whole song is really almost near the end when he says, nobody's looking up to care about a drone, all too busy looking down at our phone. Our egos.
Here's where the real prophetic comes in.
The next lines or that one?
Well, here what I'm saying is prophets started out mostly as a check and balance to the king, to the monarchy.
Right. Okay.
They were a hold accountable person that didn't answer to anybody but God. Okay. But then they also would oftentimes turn their attention to the masses and go, and you're not holding up your end of the deal either. It's easy to, it's easy for me and you or anybody else to sit and watch TV and criticize the government. Okay. I mean, that is the biggest cliche in the world. I'm 50 years old almost. I don't care who's been in what office, what political party has been in power. I have heard the same thing my entire life. And it's always, they're the problem. Yeah. They're what's wrong. They're ruining this country. And it doesn't matter who it is sitting in the seats. It's always the same. Okay. So what I hear the prophets doing is saying, well, what about you, Mr. sitting in your recliner? What about you? Let's look at you in your life. And the prophets do that. And I think he does that in this song with where you're going. I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm like, that's what a prophet does. He doesn't just point to the
Yeah.
power. It's easy to speak truth to power and go, yeah, they're not doing it. But he turns around and looks at the people and go, well, what about you? How
Yeah.
you
What are you
treating your
doing?
neighbor?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's exploiting people in mass, but how are you treating your family? How are you treating your neighbor? How are you treating the guy that you do business with? And he does that to us here. He's holding us culpable for things as well.
Yeah. Let me we'll go back to that.
Yeah, go ahead and finish the lyrics. Yeah, finish those
Yeah,
lyrics.
our egos begging for food like dog from our feed. I mean, that's got to be a reference. You mentioned the Instagram. It's got to be like a social media reference, right? Your feeds,
right?
Just looking for something to build us up and build our ego up. Refreshing obsessively until our eyes start to bleed. I love this line. They serve up distractions and we eat them with fries. That, to me, that's the line that I thought, man, that makes the whole song. I mean,
yeah.
I'm so interested, not just in this, but in just about everything that I think about. I'm interested in what distracts us and what keeps us from being the kind of people that we're supposed to be, and always looking for ways to form better habits and to become better people and cultivate better character and things like that. But the line where he says, we got all these awful, terrible things happening. People are literally dying. And we're just over here eating our fries and looking at it on a screen.
And looking at our phones.
Yeah, totally distracted from the big things in the world, whether it's war or power or who knows what else, whatever it is. So easy to be distracted. I'm just so fascinated about that, and you would think that these are huge attention grabbing things, like these are massive issues. We just keep scrolling. What is it about us that does that?
Well, I mean, we're for one, to place blame on other people. We are easily manipulated. We're being easily manipulated. Any of the people that you watch that have any of the knowledge about technology that that we use today will tell you you do not stand a chance. You do not stand a chance. You don't stand a 1 in a million chance, because the power that is behind, whether it's the psychology teams that they put together to study how the human mind works, or the algorithms and AI that they use to be able to combine all those two things and know exactly how to manipulate you to get you to do what they want. It's so powerful. They will tell you, and I wish I was prepared, like, to give you names. There's a guy that worked for Facebook in the early days. He quit, and basically his life now is dedicated to going around and lecturing about how harmful and dangerous social media is. Yeah, and he tells you, here's what's going on behind the scenes, But anyway, so the point with that is, he's made the point, you don't stand a chance. You literally, I mean, you're not. It would be like a toddler, trying to fight a Navy SEAL. There's no scenario where you have any hope of winning this. All right, so that's one reason why. All right, but that doesn't get us off the hook, because nobody put that on our phone. Nobody created that account for us. Nobody did it except us. We wanted it. We believed we could play with fire. Now, I'd say in the early days, we didn't know. We were, I remember when I first got Facebook, it was the dumbest, goofiest thing in the world. We didn't know what it was. It was just kind of fun. You could, send a message to somebody and see what somebody else was doing that you hadn't seen in a long time. All right. With the exception maybe of young people, we're not ignorant anymore. Okay. The old quote, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. We do this now with full culpability. We know we're being manipulated. We know how powerful it is, and we don't care because we enjoy it. Now, why do we enjoy it? There's the question. Why do we enjoy it? One, sometimes we have a morbid curiosity of what's going on in other people's lives. We want to see their drama. We want to see their mess. Okay. Two, our ego. We want people to see our lives, hear what we have to say, and be impressed by it, to like it, to approve of it. Sometimes we even want them to disagree, because we just want to fight with them, because we know we're right and they're wrong, and we want to show them that they're wrong. So we have a culpability in this. And that, to me, is what sets this. That's why this song is not just an anti-war song. You can go back to the 60s and listen to a lot of anti-war songs from the Vietnam era. And, I'm not an expert in that field, so there may be tons of them. I'm just not familiar with it. But the ones that at least I know, they do the criticism of the military industrial complex, to use the fancy language, but I don't hear them necessarily criticizing the individual, the people. Okay. The free love movement and, the summer of love, all that. Ultimately, that all turned into a nightmare. You had a bunch of people that wound up with horrible, horrible addictions, devastating effects on the home, out of wedlock, disease, all these social ills that were born out of this rejection of this other way.
Which has
And you
led us to
don't,
today. I mean,
which
that's
just led us to today.
1969,
Exactly.
I think, was a formative year that led us to today.
I agree
That's neither here nor
100%.
there, but I'm
Right.
on board with you. Yeah.
But see, so I don't hear, and again, there may be some, I'm just not familiar with them, where they're criticizing, hey, this may not be good for us. All right. And so one of the reasons I love this song is, yeah, he gives kind of the middle finger to the man, but then he turns around and looks at himself or the rest of us and go, yeah, what about us?
Yeah.
How different are we in all of this? Um, there was a book that I read probably in about 2001, somewhere in there, 2000, 2001. Neil Postman wrote a book called Amusing Ourselves to Death. Now, bear in mind, this book was written in 1985. That's almost a decade before the internet, or at least to the general public. I think the internet was made available to the general public like 1993. I didn't get it until 1999. We're in here in sticks. But so it's 20 years before the smartphone. So I wrote this quote down because I thought he's saying the same thing that Sturgill's saying. All right. So, and by the way, in amusing ourselves to death, he one of the quotes from there is that he's forcing us to accept our culpability. That's the whole point of the book. All right. So here's what he says: everything in our background has prepared us to know and resist a prison when the gates begin to close around us. But what if there are no cries of anguish to be heard? Who is prepared? Notice this. Who is prepared to take up arms against a sea of amusements called arms? All right. To whom do we complain, and when, and in what tone of voice, when serious discourse dissolves into giggles? What is the antidote to a culture being drained by laughter? People will come to adore the technologies that undo their capacity to think. 10 years before the internet, 20, Neil Postman was prophetic, right?
Say that
Now,
last line again, if you don't mind.
okay.
That was,
I know, right? Some deep stuff. People will come to adore the technologies that undo their capacity to think.
so he's probably thinking television, right? You just sit there and
He's
mindlessly.
absolutely, his whole book is about television for the most
Oh,
part.
is it? Okay.
Yeah.
And so
In
he's thinking
fact, even
television.
the cover of the edition that I have is like a nuclear family, and they've got dad's got the suit and tie on, the kids, the Donna Reed kind of looking, Leave It to
Yeah.
Beaver picture, and they all have televisions for heads.
But that's before everything was intentionally engineered, maybe before we knew the powerful connection to dopamine or something on our reward centers of the brain, and this reward cycle that I think really creates addicts out of us. and wow, that's really prophetic. So distracted
And
by
again,
TV.
and what prophetic really means. Again, going back to that quote about observing the trends and connecting the dots and seeing where it's going to lead us. I know you're a golfer. You understand trajectory. It's not just about, here's the ball and there's how you strike the ball, the force that you use, the angle of the club head, the wind. So many factors are coming in to determining the trajectory of it. And if you watch it on television, they've got that great thing, the ball tracker now. So as soon as they swing, that thing can predict where the ball's going because
Yeah.
they've got the velocity, the head speed, all that. They can show you where this thing's going to land. Okay, that's all I mean by this prophetic is, Neil, that's the same Neil Gaiman. That's a different one. Neil Postman. He's not. God didn't speak to him and tell him, say these things. He's just paying attention, and he's like, "Here's where this is going to end up." And you know what? He was incredibly prescient, in his accuracy. And I think Sturgill is tying into that with this song, is he's saying, okay, what are the byproducts of these things happening? Okay, what happens when these institutions abuse their power for less than noble ends, at the expense of the people who are willing to make sacrifices to achieve those ends? And what he sees, I read a thing just this week. This guy had written this article about the shocking amount of young people that are embracing and open to Marxism. And he was just astonished. And I'm like, I'm not astonished. Because again, look at the world they're growing up in. They're looking at things, abuses of power, and like some of the stuff he talks about in the song. Here's we're sending people to die for oil, and here grandma's having to sell her pills,
Yeah.
To pay her rent, or to put food on the table or whatever. And he's doing he's doing the same thing. He's like, I can't pay my bills. Here I go, and I sign up to go, serve and protect, and I get back, and I'm not even making I can't afford insurance, car payment, mortgage, food, my kids' braces. I can't even pay my bills. I'm not trying to live an exorbitant life of a rock star. I'm just trying to live. And when people grow up in that world, I think what you see start to happen is and you see this especially with young people who maybe are limited in their scope of things. They begin to think, what good is freedom if I can't afford rent and food or health care? What good? You can't eat freedom. Okay. You can't sleep in freedom. So, okay, yeah, I've got it. Great. But I need real tangible things. Now, I think it's a horrible overreaction, to go to say like Marxism is the answer, So I think there's a naivety in that, because you go from a flawed system to an even worse system, I think.
Yeah.
But I can sympathize with the frustration of the giving up of
I get the
this ain't working.
too.
And I think it's biblical. It's biblical. Okay, Israel, they come out of Egypt, they get in the wilderness, and they go, hey, we ain't gonna eat. And then what do they want to do?
Go back.
They want to go back. They want to kill the guy in charge, blame the guy, shake your finger at the man, kill the guy in charge, and go back to slavery, because at least we had garlic and onions,
right?
And that's what. See, to me, that there you. Again, I know this isn't a biblical podcast, but the Bible is just a collection of stories about the realities of existence. Now maybe at a different time, a different culture, but what we find out is, apart from technologies and things like that, nothing really has changed throughout human history.
Humans are humans. We are what we
Humans are humans, and we keep having the same problems. Now they're dressed up in different things, but at their core, there's still things. So when people have liberty but lack necessities, they become restless, and they start to think, what's the point?
Yeah.
And I think that you see that in younger generations. I think that's what's coming across in this song is we're just done, and let's at least distract ourselves with something that takes our mind off of it. Never mind, he ends with the line that, the bombs are going to fall out of our own skies. In other words, and I don't know that he literally means like, a foreign invader is going to drop bombs on us. I think what he's going to say is we're going to reap what we've sown, and it's going to result in our own destruction too.
And that's biblical. I mean,
exactly.
The principle of actions and consequences, reap what you sow. I mean, that's
you reap what you sow.
Hey, I want to get your take on this
get
quote.
Away from it.
You just mentioned distractions again. This is kind of long. It's from Patrick Deneen and Why Liberalism Failed. Are you familiar with that?
I've heard it, but I'm not. I haven't read it. No.
I'd like to hear what you think about this. It's kind of long, but he says, in this world, gratitude to the past and obligations to the future are replaced by a nearly universal pursuit of immediate gratification. On board. And he defines that as, or he goes on, culture, rather than imparting wisdom and experience of the past so as to cultivate virtues of self-restraint and civility, becomes synonymous with hedonic titillation, visceral crudeness, and distractions, all oriented toward promoting consumption, appetite, and detachment. And as a result, superficially self-maximizing, socially destructive behaviors begin to dominate society. Man, he says a lot,
Yeah.
but I think he's saying exactly what Sturgill Simpson says here. We have so much to distract ourselves with that we don't notice the big things. What do you think?
I'm gonna dumb it down. His quote in a way I think that maybe the average person can understand it. Um, you ever been? And maybe this isn't an issue for you, but it is for a lot of people. Your life is not what you want it to be. You got problems that you don't have the ability to solve, or the know-how to solve, or the resources to solve. So you feel stuck, or you feel stuck. You know, it may not be true, but you feel stuck. You had a bad day. So what do? I'm gonna sit down. I'm gonna eat a gallon of ice cream, and I'm gonna binge watch whatever your binge watch preference is. And at least tonight, I'm gonna feel good.
Yeah.
I'm eating delicious ice cream, as much of it as I want. Watching this thing that I'm watching that's entertaining to me for whatever reasons. Now, no thought to tomorrow, no thought to the impact it's going to have. And I do that, I do that a couple of times this week because, these problems aren't going away. And you can get into this trap of your own making where you are self indulging in things to medicate your own pain, but they become the catalyst for your pain. And it's this vicious cycle. And I would say that a significant portion of our modern culture is in that whirlpool. And every now and then somebody pokes their head up and screams out, this is not good. It's not right. We're not made to be this way. It's not supposed to be like this, and I think songs like this can help, maybe, at least for a moment, like I said, that slap across the face and go, dude, wake up. What are you doing? You can't change every problem you have, but you have tremendous control over the outcome of your life. There's a lot of things, you're right, you'll never be able to fix. You can't do it. It's bigger, but think about the 1,000 things in your life that you have 100% control over. What if you fix those things? It might be that your life got better in a way that you could never conceive. And you know what? You might be able to influence other people. And, before you know it, again, you can't set out trying to change the world. Most people set out just trying to fix what they see wrong in their own life. And every so often, I don't know if it's God's touch, I don't know what it is, those things ignite movements where lots of people get caught up in it and swept up in it, and massive change takes place. I don't think you can wake up one day and go, you know what? I'm going to be the person that history remembers for fixing this.
Yeah.
And I think if you tried to, you probably will do a lot of harm in the process because you're going to get to thinking the ends justify the means. So I think a lot of it is just about personal self-reflection, personal accountability, dealing with and changing things that you can, speaking up when you can, trying to have an influence. And, who knows, maybe God says you can handle, there was a time I used to want to save the world. And then I got to know myself better and go, yeah, if God used me for that, it probably ruined me.
Yeah.
Probably. That's why, I'm so
Well, that's the Elvis ego, right?
averse. I'm so averse to celebrity because, my boys will tell you the quote they've heard me repeat over and over their whole lives is, it's not true that a wise man learns from his mistakes. A fool learns from his mistakes. A wise man learns from the mistakes of others. And so, I look at Michael Jackson, Kurt Cobain, Elvis, whoever, and I go, yeah, I don't want my life to go that way. I don't want to be super powerful and famous and rich and well known, because chances are there's probably hardly any of us that could handle that kind of thing without being ruined. And I don't really want to ruin, I don't need all that to ruin my life. I've done plenty of dumb stuff with
You
my very little, playground that I have to work in.
you may have just answered it a few minutes ago, but what is my role in this? What's your role in this? If this is life, that there are major issues that you and I are probably never going to solve. At least that doesn't seem like the trajectory that we're on at this point in our lives. What is my role in this? When so many bad things are happening, and whether it's the needless loss of life or something on a smaller scale than that. Just any kind of injustice or any kind of, tragedy or any kind of just bad situation. What's my role? What do I do?
I wish I was prepared for that question because I've got a couple of quotes that I'm not able to riff off the top of my head that speak to that. But the idea I'll boil it down to is this: don't become so over. C.S. Lewis has got a quote, and it boils down to don't be so overwhelmed by all of the horrors that exist that you lose sight of the fact that any small injustice that you see is not worth fixing because it doesn't fix the problem.
There's still value
So
in
I
that.
think, right, there's still value in it. Absolutely. I mean, okay, yes, you can, do something in one big fell swoop, but you can also do something in 1,000 little actions. The old expression of how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time, Um, so when you accumulate enough of these, quote unquote small things, but here's the funny thing: if you're encountering a situation where somebody is suffering from some injustice or tragedy, and you do something to alleviate that or at least help them endure it, I don't think it's a small thing to them. Yeah, this
Yeah,
is so
right.
crazy. As a preacher, whenever stuff happened to people, we were always kind of the first responders. You're the ones that get to people's house, pray with them, help them, do this kind of stuff. And take food, take casseroles, blah blah blah. I did it just because I thought it was what you do as a good person. Um, when my grandfather died, very early morning hours, the family gets woke up. We get called, and little by little, we start assembling at my grandmother's house. And hour rolls after hour. We're talking, crying, everything that goes into all that. And somewhere around 11 or 12 o'clock, a lady from church shows up with a couple of buckets of KFC. I didn't even realize I was starving. I'm hungry. I didn't realize, we were just so distracted and consumed. But when she showed up with it, as silly as it sounds, that was an offering that was one of the most beautiful things. The story where the woman anoints Jesus's feet, and he says she did what she could.
She did what she could.
She's done what she could. Okay, this lady brought a couple of buckets of chicken.
Yeah.
That was, my gosh, my granny's been dead over 20 years, or around 20 years now. I still remember that vividly. It was a life-changing moment of why service, when people are in the midst of tragedy, is so important, because I felt it. And so now it's like, okay, somebody's sick, somebody dies, whatever. I can't heal people. I can't raise people from the dead, but I can make sure that their family's not hungry today while they're busy making plans and crying and looking through photo albums, and doesn't even realize, because at some point you are going to realize you're hungry. Okay. And then what? You can stop and fix lunch. You got to go get something, you don't want to worry with that stuff right now.
Yeah.
And so those little acts, they do matter. They do matter. And that's the thing. I think, what is our role? Every one of us has people in our lives that we have a powerful impact on. Most people in the world don't know my name, never will know my name, and could care less about anything that I think. But there's a handful of people that is completely not true, that consider everything that I think about to be important. They want to know they want to hear my take on something. They want me around. They ask for my guidance, advice. They need my help. And the best thing I think I can do is to do that. Where I have the ability to have positive influence, work on myself, share that with other people, and then just let it be in God's hand what happens from there. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. He'll do what he needs to do. And you may wind up being the kid that has a couple of fish and some bread, and now there's a
Right.
whole, now you're one of the most famous people in the Bible, even though
Yeah.
nobody knows your name,
Do you
or you anointed some, with some oil, and we're 2,000 years removed from that.
yeah.
Around the world, probably every day, somebody's telling that woman's story. She just did what she could that day. So,
Anytime somebody says something like that, it always you know who Fred Craddock is?
oh yeah,
Yeah. So he has that sermon.
preached his sermon as my farewell sermon in Florida.
Don't call it a list.
Oh, that's just
At the
that's
end of
just
that
where it's
sermon, you
at.
know, he just tells this story, and woman's new in town, and they went down to the river for a baptizing, and after she's baptized, or whatever, they just go around the circle and tell their name and what they do, and if you
I work
you
on
know,
cars. If your car never needs help, I
call
can
me.
help you.
Hey, if you need a babysitter
Iron
to run out,
clothes.
yep,
You know,
yeah, man, that is
bring
good.
if you
And
need
he
some
said
laundry
they
done,
had a
bring it
name
to
for
me.
that. They had a name for that group. I've heard it in other places, but that's church. I
That's
love it.
church.
And
That's
every
it.
time somebody
That's
says
it.
something like, it's the small things you do, it is the small things. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not going to do anything that's earth shattering. You're not going to do anything really earth shattering. But I mean, we can do small things that are good and beautiful things that mean something to somebody. That's our job. That's our job.
I could tell stories all day. I've got my own list of people that if there was ever some reason for me, I'm going to use biblical language. I'm not being serious here. If I was ever going to write, the gospel according to Brandon, these would be the stories I would tell. They're just regular people. Probably, I mean, nobody. If I gave you any of the names, you wouldn't know a soul on that list. But they showed up at pivotal moments in my life and had a profound impact on it for good, and they don't even know it. I mean,
Yeah.
when I say they don't know it, they didn't. They know it because I've tried to tell those people. Um, but they just showed up one day to do this or that, or they just answered the phone when I called, or let me ramble on for 2 hours. But they did or said something that you know I wouldn't. I don't know what life would be, but it wouldn't be what it is now.
Yeah.
And I'm in a good place, and I'm grateful to be where I'm at because I've been in a place that was just a pain that I'll never have words for, and I'm so far removed from that now. And there's a dozen little stories like that of people over those 10 or 12 years that if I was writing my story, they would be my boy with the loaves and the fishes, or the woman with the alabaster box, because that's how big of much it meant to me. And so I just try to remind myself, I don't think anybody in the Bible except Jesus is anything special. I think the reason those stories are in the Bible is because those people were willing to say yes.
Yeah.
Opportunity present itself. Hey, you got the knowledge from God of what it means to be a good human in this situation. Are you going to do it or not?
Yeah. I
And
think that's
a
kind of
lot
the
of
call to
people.
arms. I mean, that it's not to take up arms. It's, hey, what can you do? Go do it.
Well,
Make the world a little bit of a better
yeah,
place.
that's the song. Are you just gonna, like I said, you gonna keep your head down
Yeah.
until the world comes crashing down on top of you, or are you gonna stand up and take notice? Now I know this is a Sturgill Simpson thing, but I got to get a dig in for another one of my favorite songwriters. There's a John Prine song. Have you ever heard Spanish Pipe Dream?
No.
Are you familiar with that one? You got to look it
Uh,
up because he. Let me say this. Um, you and I had a conversation recently about Call to Arms and Sturgill and Jason Isbell and Dress Blues, and how that's long, but it comes from a place of grief rather than a place of anger. Um,
mm-hmm.
well, John Prine's Spanish Pipe Dream, I think, is the same. I think it's the same song, but I think it's coming from a place of joy. Uh, all of those are productive. Anger can be very productive. You gotta be careful. It's like nitroglycerin. You gotta be careful because you can blow stuff up too. Um, but it's a powerful fuel. Grief is too. And so that song "Dress Blues," and tell the people who anybody listens, pull that one up and listen to it. I actually lived. I used to drive on that road every day of the soldier that he's talking about in that song.
Man, that one
Um,
gets me.
he's he's from the Green Hills, Killen, Alabama area. Um, and it's from grief, but Spanish Pipe Dream is the same idea, but it's from a place of joy. And ultimately, I think that's a better fuel for what we're talking about. The others burn hot. There's no doubt about it and fast. Kind of like you ever heard the illustrations? Like, you can start a fire with leaves super easy. Only problem is it burns out just as quickly.
Hmm.
You can't keep a house warm off leaves. All right. And it takes a lot to get a hickory log burning. But once you get it burning, sucker's gonna heat the house all night. Anger and grief are like the leaves. Yeah, they'll light a fire in you quick. But joy and love, to me, they burn longer and they'll go farther. So in his song Spanish Pipe Dream, here's kind of his summation. Uh, he says, blow up your TV, throw away your newspaper, move to the country and build you a home, plant a little garden, eat a lot of peaches, try and find Jesus on your own. And that's
Oh,
the
that's awesome.
philosophy. That's the philosophy I take a little more these days. It's like,
Yeah.
you know what? You can get mad. But if you stay mad, you're probably just going to make life miserable for everybody around you.
Yeah. I've
You're
seen that.
probably not going to change
Yeah.
the world. You're probably not going to change the world. You're just going to ruin some other people's. So, how about you do something constructive?
Man, good stuff. I'm so glad you came on, and I was looking forward to hearing what you had to say. This
I'm
has been real.
glad you had me on because nobody else them around me, they won't hear me talk about the Rambo, about Sturgill Simpson songs.
Well,
I'm trying to tell everybody about the philosophy of Sturgill Simpson. I'm like, listen to this song. Do you hear this line? Do you realize how deep this is? Like, this guy, this is not a throwaway line. I mean, this is deep theology. This is deep, philosophy. He's quoting, something that's 3,000 years old. It's just putting it in my, and they're like, this guy's weird.
well,
That's
that
kind
is
of a,
weird, and that's
yeah,
okay. It's good.
this is weird. But so I'm tickled that there's an avenue where somebody go, you know what? Yeah, let's talk about this. This is gonna be fun. And
I think it is. I think it's good, and as long as you enjoy it and I enjoy it, we can do it
yeah,
again.
I hope you'll expand beyond this. I hope that, when you kind of run out of saying what you're gonna say about Sturgill, that, maybe you branch out into other artists, and because there's so much. I'm a let me say this. I know we got to get off. This has been too long. I realize, but I grew up as anti-art as you could. Okay, like Southern redneck. You know, I'm not mean to be derogatory to anybody, but just Pulaski, Tennessee is not a hub of culture. When it comes to art. And I got kicked out of my art class the first day I was in that because as a freshman, I made some smart aleck comment, a little young punk about art. And the teacher's like, you know what? Get out of my class. You're not taking my class. And I kind of respect her for it now. That she was like, yeah, you're not the kind of person that needs to be in here. Um, Now, that being said, I'm on the opposite end of the spectrum now. I think it's a tragedy that one of the first things that gets cut in schools when there's funding problems is art, um, because it speaks a language. You talked about beauty, and I know you and I share a respect for a quote that became a book. Beauty will save the world. Um, and I have found that I have positive changes taking place in my life far more by being inspired by beauty, which usually is presented through art, than just railing against something that's on the nightly news. We're going to bring this guy in and he's going to tell you how awful this is. Then we're going to bring somebody else and he's going to tell you how awful that guy is. That stuff never inspired me. It just made me a cynical, angry person. And art it can make me angry because, like I said, first time I heard this song too, I'm like, oh, yeah, I'm mad
Mm.
too. But it went deeper than that. And especially when you got to the end, it's like, hey, this is not just you don't just get to get mad. You got to look at yourself because some of this you're complicit. And you may not control what somebody sitting in an office decides is going to happen on the other side of the world, but you control everything that happens in your heart and in your life. So do that. And I think art has a tremendous way of giving us art can make us understand something that we don't know how to phrase. You talked about didn't have the vocabulary for earlier. I had these feelings. I just didn't know how to say it to somebody else. And I think art, especially music, has a profound ability to do that. And I think that's what makes a good artist is when he didn't write this song about me, but I find me in it. That's how you know it's a good song
Yeah.
because he wrote it about whatever he wrote about. Like I said, maybe one day you get to interview Sturgill and he can tell you what he meant by some of this stuff. because I promise you, it meant something very specific to him.
Yeah.
And probably all of us are hearing something totally different. We're hearing what it means to us. That's what good art does. Holds up a mirror, it shows us these things. And so this is awesome. Wish you absolute best in all this.
Three Chords in the Truth is about exploring the intersection of God and good music, uncovering what's real, what's good, what's beautiful in the music, and thinking about how it points us to what is true, what's really true.